The desert sun had just cleared the eastern ridge when the 13th shot went wide. 60 meters long, 30 meters right. A miss so catastrophic it didn't even kick up dust near the target. The Barrett MRAD's report echoed across the wasteland of the Naval Special Warfare Training Grounds outside Sagefield, Arizona, then died in the September heat. No one spoke. No one moved. Just 13 elite shooters staring downrange at a silhouette that might as well have been on the moon. 3,600 meters. 2.2 miles of broken desert, shimmering heat and physics that didn't forgive. Senior Chief Garrett Stryker lowered the spotting scope and dragged a hand across his face. 48 years old, 2 decades in the teams, and he'd never seen a course beat this many shooters this badly. His voice came out flat when he finally spoke. Clear the line. That's 13 attempts, 13 failures. Yeah, Staff Sergeant Cole Bridger stepped back from the rifle jaw, tight tribal tattoo on his neck, dark against sunburned skin. 32 Army Special Forces, and he'd just put 2 rounds closer to target than anyone else all morning. 1 meter off, might as well have been a kilometer. Senior Chief, that distance is theoretical. Bridger's drawl carried frustration he was trying to hide. No one makes that shot in field conditions. Wind's 2 variable mirage is trashing the reeds past 2,500 meters. Save it, Staff Sergeant. Stryker wasn't interested in excuses. He'd seen impossible shots made by people who didn't waste time explaining why they couldn't be done. He checked the roster on his tablet, scrolled down to the last name, and felt his expression tighten. 1 shooter left. He looked up, scanning the observation area behind the firing line. Petty Officer First Class, Harlow. That's when the men noticed her, 30 feet back from the firing line, standing in a slice of shadow cast by the equipment shed. She'd been there the whole time, but in the way that certain people can be present without demanding attention. Now 14 pairs of eyes found her all at once. Kenzie Harlow was 29 years old and looked like she'd been carved from the same hard desert stone that surrounded them. 5'7" lean in the way long-distance runners are lean, with dark auburn hair pulled into a regulation bun so tight it could have been painted on. A scar cut through her left eyebrow, pale against tan skin. She wore fatigues that fit like they'd been through 100 field ops, not fresh from supply. But it was her eyes that made Bridger take a step back without meaning to. Slate gray, still as glass, the kind of eyes that had seen things and decided not to talk about them. Her right hand rested against her left wrist, fingers brushing something hidden under her sleeve. A gesture so unconscious it might have been breathing. Stryker's voice came out harder than he intended. Ma'am, I think you're at the wrong range. This is Tier 1 Precision Trials. Advanced qualification. Kenzie's gaze shifted to him, didn't hurry, didn't flinch. Roster says I'm cleared, Senior Chief. Her voice was quiet, Midwest somewhere, vowels flat and practical. The kind of voice that didn't waste words because it had learned words didn't change things. Only actions did. Bridger couldn't help himself. The smirk came before he could stop it. Let the men handle this one, sweetheart. 3 of the other shooters laughed. Not loud, but loud enough that Kenzie heard it. She didn't react, didn't turn her head, just kept her eyes on Stryker, like Bridger, and his commentary existed in a different dimension she wasn't interested in visiting. Stryker felt something cold move through his gut. He looked down at the tablet again, pulled up Harlow's file, and that's when he saw the classification markers. Red text, Level 5 restricted access. His thumb hovered over the expand button, then pressed it. The screen filled with redacted blocks, but 3 words jumped out clear as gunshots. Operation Nightfall. Derrick Pass. Classified. His face must have changed because Kenzie's expression shifted just slightly. Recognition. She knew he'd seen it. Stryker's voice dropped 20 decibels. You were at Derrick Pass. It wasn't a question. Kenzie gave the smallest nod. Once, that's all. Bridger looked between them, smile fading. What's Derrick Pass? One of the SEALs, a quiet operator named Harrison, with a chest full of ribbons, spoke up from the back. Classified op, Afghanistan 2020, bad one, real bad. That's all I know. The temperature on the range seemed to drop despite the climbing sun. Stryker opened his mouth to say something else, but the sound of tires on gravel cut him off. Everyone turned. A black SUV was rolling up the access road, moving fast enough to throw dust. It stopped 30 feet from the firing line, and Commander Hollis Durant stepped out. 47-years-old aviators reflecting the desert like mirrors command ball cap with the gold scrambled eggs that meant serious time in serious places. He moved like a man who'd spent his career answering directly to admirals and didn't particularly care what anyone below that rank thought about it. Senior Chief Stryker, Durant's voice carried parade ground authority without needing to shout. Is there a problem? Sir, Stryker straightened. Petty Officer Harlow is on the advanced precision roster, but I'm not clear on why she's cleared for trials at this level. She's cleared. Durant cut him off clean. Under direct orders from Captain Rowan Pierce, Nightfall Command. Is there some part of direct orders you need me to explain? Stryker's jaw worked. No, sir. Durant's attention shifted to Kenzie. For 3 seconds, they looked at each other, and something passed between them that everyone on the range felt, but no one understood. Petty Officer Harlow. Durant's voice dropped into a register meant for her ears only, but in the desert stillness it carried. You know why you're here? What do? Yes, sir. Kenzie's tone didn't change. To qualify. To prove it wasn't luck. Durant's words hit like hammer strikes. 3 years ago, Kenzie's hand moved to her wrist again, fingers pressing against something under the fabric. The gesture lasted maybe 2 seconds before she dropped her arm. Yes, sir. Durant held her gaze another beat, then turned and walked back to the SUV without another word. The engine started. The vehicle reversed, turned, and disappeared down the access road, trailing dust like a ghost. Bridger waited until the sound faded completely before he spoke, voice low and sharp. Diversity checkbox bullshit. This time Kenzie did turn her head. Not fast, not aggressive, just a slow pivot until her gray eyes locked onto Bridger with the kind of focus a scope brings to a target at distance. She didn't say anything, didn't need to. The look said everything. Bridger felt his face heat and told himself it was the sun. Stryker cleared his throat, trying to find his command presence again. Right, let's move on. But Kenzie was already walking toward the firing line. Red Mesa, Nevada, summer 2001. The memory came the way it always did when Kenzie stood behind a rifle. Unbidden, unwanted, unavoidable. She was 7 years old, standing on an overturned milk crate because she wasn't tall enough to see over the shooting bench any other way. The .22 rifle was almost as long as she was tall, and the scope made it feel like she was carrying a fence post. Her father knelt beside her in the dirt. Gunnery Sergeant Wyatt Harlow, United States Marine Corps. 42 years old, with a face carved by 2 wars and a dozen deployments that had taught him more about death than most men learned in 2 lifetimes. He had kind eyes despite all that, hands that were gentle when they adjusted her grip on the rifle stock. The rifle is an extension of your mind, Kenz. His voice was West Texas gravel, smoothed by patience. You don't aim at the target. You see the bullet's path before the trigger breaks. You see where it needs to go. But the tin cans lined up on a fence post 200 yards out. Heat waves made them shimmer like they were underwater. Count every factor, Wyatt continued. Wind, distance, the earth turning beneath you. All of it matters. Trust the numbers, then let it happen. Kenzie squinted through the scope. The crosshairs danced across the first can, then the second, then wandered off into the desert because her arms were shaking. She pulled the trigger. Dirt kicked up 10 feet to the right of the fence. Again. She loaded another round, aimed, fired, miss. Again, 17 shots, 17 misses. The sun climbed higher and the heat pressed down like a physical weight, and her arms burned and her eyes watered from staring through glass at things that wouldn't sit still. Wyatt never raised his voice, never showed frustration, just knelt there in the dirt and adjusted her cheek. Well guided her, breathing taught her to read the grass moving in wind she couldn't feel, to see the mirage in the scope and understand what it was telling her about air currents she couldn't see. Breathe in for 4 counts, he said. Out for 6. Settle into the natural pause between breaths. That's where the shot lives. The sun was touching the western mountains when something clicked. Not in the rifle, in Kenzie's head. She saw the wind moving through scrub brush at 100 yards. Saw it bend the grass at 150. Watched it die down as it reached the fence post. She felt her heartbeat in her fingertips on the trigger. Felt the rhythm of her breathing slow and steady. She saw the bullet's path before it existed. The crosshairs settled on the first can. Perfectly still. Perfectly centered. The rifle cracked. The can jumped off the post. 12 more shots. 12 more cans fell. When the last one spun into the dust, Wyatt put a hand on her shoulder. Excellence isn't beating someone else, Kenz. It's beating who you were yesterday. Remember that. She remembered. The memory dissolved, and Kenzie was back in Arizona, September 2023, 22 years older, and carrying weight her 7-year-old self couldn't have imagined. She approached the Barrett MRAD like she was meeting an old friend. No rush, no wasted motion. Every step deliberate and economical, in the way of someone who'd learned that hurrying got people killed. The rifle waited on its bipod, 38 pounds of precision machinery, chambered in .375 Shatek. Schmidt and Bender scope riding a 40 MOA rail, a weapon system that cost more than some people's cars and demanded respect from anyone who touched it. Kenzie cleared the chamber. Checked the magazine. 5 rounds of 350-grain, cutting-edge brass. She worked the bolt, felt the mechanical perfection of metal sliding on metal, and allowed herself 3 seconds to appreciate the craftsmanship. Behind her, Bridger folded his arms across his chest. "This gonna take all day." She didn't answer. Just settled into shooting position, made microscopic adjustments to the cheek rest and stock until her body alignment was perfect. Muscle memory from 10,000 repetitions took over. Her breathing slowed without her thinking about it. Stryker moved to the primary spotting scope, professional, despite his doubts. Wind from the west at 8 miles per hour, gusting to 10. Temperature 88 degrees Fahrenheit. Barometric pressure 29.88. Mirage heavy at 2,000 meters. Moderate at 2,500 light beyond the target. Bearing 082 degrees. Range 3,600 meters. Elevation differential plus 52 feet. Kenzie absorbed every detail. Filed them away in the part of her brain that had been doing ballistic calculations since she was tall enough to look through a scope. Westerly wind meant right push on the bullet, but the gusts made it unpredictable. She'd need to either wait for a lull or dial for maximum correction and accept the variance. The elevation advantage was minor, maybe worth half an MOA. Negligible at this distance where errors stacked like compounding interest. She peered through the scope. The target was a Type E silhouette, barely a smudge against shimmering heat. At 3,600 meters, it occupied roughly the same visual space as a quarter held at arm's length. Except the quarter was 2 miles away, and the air between here and there was doing everything it could to make the shot impossible. Her mind ran the numbers automatically. Bullet drop would be catastrophic. Close to 80 feet of vertical fall. The bullet would arc like a mortar round, rising first, then plunging down in a ballistic curve that looked more like hope than science. 320 minutes of angle elevation once she factored in the 40 MOA rail. Wind drift at this distance could push the round 8 feet off course. Even more if the gusts hit at the wrong moment. She'd need 74 minutes of angle windage to compensate. Maybe 73 if the wind settled. Then there was Coriolis effect. The Earth's rotation would nudge the bullet almost 2 feet right. Spin drift would add another 6 inches. Humidity, air density, temperature gradients in the bullet's flight path, all of it mattered. All of it could kill the shot. Her right hand moved to the elevation turret. Each click was deliberate. She counted them without counting. The muscle memory of precision built over years. 320 MOA dialed. Her left hand moved to windage. 74.5 MOA right. The math was done. Now came the hard part. Trusting it, she began her breathing cycle. 4-count inhale. 6-count exhale. Settle into the pause. That's when Bridger's voice cut across the range loud enough to make sure everyone heard. $20 says she doesn't even hit dirt. Laughter rippled through the observers. Not cruel exactly, just men who'd already decided how this would end and found dark humor in watching it play out. Kenzie's finger froze on the trigger. The focus she'd been building shattered like glass. Her heart rate spiked. Breathing hitched. The crosshairs that had been steady started to drift. She lifted her cheek from the stock and closed her eyes. Reset, she needed to reset, but the ghosts were already there. Afghanistan, spring 2020. The memory hit harder than the one from childhood because this one still had teeth. Kenzie was 26 years old and was assigned to SEAL Team 3 as their designated marksman. Not a SEAL herself, the community hadn't opened that door yet, but trusted enough to provide overwatch for operations where precision fire could mean the difference between everyone coming home or some people staying forever. That's where she met Master Chief Nathaniel Brennan. 36 years old, call sign True North. Because in 15 years with the teams through Ramadi and Fallujah, and a dozen places that never made the news, Brennan had been the one constant everyone oriented toward. Solid voice on the radio, calm hands under fire. The kind of operator who made everyone around him better just by existing. He was testing her the first time they met, not obviously. Just setting up a range session and asking her to run the MK13 Mod 7 through its paces while he watched. Kenzie put 98 out of 100 rounds through the 10 ring at distances that made the range safety officer nervous. When she cleared the weapon and stood up, Brennan nodded once. Wyatt Harlow's daughter. It wasn't a question. I served with your father in Iraq. He trained some of the best scouts the Corps ever produced. He trained me to respect the Rifle Master Chief. Show me. So she did, day after day, mission after mission, Brennan taught her things you couldn't learn from manuals. Ultra-long-range instinct shooting. How to read mirage like a language. How to feel wind on your face and know exactly what it was doing at 1,000 meters. How to make shots that existed in the gray zone between possible and impossible. They were on a ridge above the Derrick Pass Valley when everything ended. Spring dawn, temperature 42 degrees and dropping. The compound was 1,400 meters away, sitting in a bowl of mountains that funneled wind like a wind tunnel. Mission was simple on paper. Team 3 goes in, grabs the high-value target, extracts before sunrise. Kenzie and Brennan provide overwatch, eliminate threats, keep the assault team breathing. Brennan was on the primary rifle. Kenzie had the spotting scope and backup weapon. Wind 6 miles per hour right to left, she called softly. Thermals rising as the sun hits the east face. Call it 7 miles per hour in 30 seconds. Good read. Brennan's voice was calm as still water. This should be textbook. Radio chatter in their ears. Team 3 moving into position. Breaching charges set. Everyone in place. Then the world exploded. The intel had been catastrophically, fatally wrong. The compound wasn't a safe house. It was a fortress. Booby-trapped, pre-sighted with intersecting fields of fire that caught Team 3 in a kill box the moment they breached. Automatic weapons fire shredded the darkness. Explosions threw bodies. Screaming on the radio, the kind of screaming that meant people were dying right now and there was nothing anyone could do to stop it. Brennan engaged immediately. The Mk-13 barked, and a machine gunner 1,600 meters away dropped before he could empty his belt into the trapped assault team. Second gunner, 11 o'clock low, Kenzie called. Range 1550. Brennan adjusted, fired. The second gunner fell. They worked like a single organism. Kenzie calling targets and corrections. Brennan eliminating threats with mechanical precision. The assault team was pinned but alive because of the suppression fire raining down from the ridge. 3 minutes into the ambush, Kenzie saw movement. High ground they'd missed in the pre-mission brief. Rock outcropping at 2 o'clock, maybe 2,000 meters out. She started to call it, but her brain was a half-second behind what her eyes were seeing. The muzzle flash came first. Then the sound of impact. Meat and bone and Kevlar all making the wrong sounds at once. Brennan's chest plate caught the round, but the angle was wrong. The bullet punched through the ceramic and into him, tumbling, tearing. Blood sprayed across the rocks. Brennan went down. Kenzie was on him before he finished falling. Hands moving on autopilot. Combat medical training taking over. Pressure. Gauze. Pack the wound. Control the bleeding. But the blood wouldn't stop. It soaked through the gauze, through her gloves, hot and dark and wrong. Brennan's hand shot out and grabbed her wrist. Right where her compass rose, tattoo would be 3 years later. His grip was weak but desperate. Finish it. Blood bubbled through his lips. 2 o'clock. 2,200 meters. Rock shelf. Medevac is 3 minutes out. Kenzie's voice cracked. Stay with me, I can... You're ready. Brennan's eyes locked onto hers. Always were. Finish. His grip went slack. His eyes stayed open, but the light behind them died. For 2 seconds, Kenzie knelt there with her hands covered in his blood and her mind refusing to accept what her eyes were seeing. Then the radio screamed at her. Overwatch, we're getting shredded. Where's our fire support? She laid Brennan down gently, moved to his rifle, settled behind it with hands that should have been shaking, but somehow weren't. Found the rock shelf at 2 o'clock through the scope, 2,200 meters. Crosswind 15 miles per hour gusting to 20. 90-foot elevation differential. Dawn light creating thermal layers that bent the bullet path like refraction in water. The enemy sniper was good, ghillie suit that blended perfectly with the terrain. Only visible when he shifted position to acquire his next target. Target acquisition on one of her teammates who was bleeding in the dirt 2,000 meters away. Kenzie ran the calculations. 280 minutes of angle elevation, 68 MOA wind, Coriolis, spin drift, temperature. Every variable her father had taught her to count, every lesson Brennan had drilled into her. She heard Wyatt's voice from 20 years ago. Trust the numbers, then let it happen. She heard Brennan's voice from 3 minutes ago. Finish it. Her breathing slowed. 4 count in, 6 count out. Settle. Heartbeat in her fingertips on the trigger. Steady, rhythmic. She waited for the space between beats. Pressed. The rifle kicked into her shoulder. 2.1 seconds of flight time. The longest 2.1 seconds of her life. The enemy sniper's head snapped back, and he dropped like someone had cut his strings. Team 3 extracted under her covering fire. 12 men made it out. 5 were wounded. 3 would never walk right again. But they made it out. Kenzie carried Brennan's body down the mountain herself. Refused help even when her legs were screaming and her lungs were burning. carried him all the way to the extract bird. 6 months later, they gave her a Bronze Star with Valor. The citation was vague, generic, classified operations language that said everything and nothing. The real after-action report was buried so deep it might as well not exist, because Brennan had been working counterintelligence operations tied to weapons trafficking. His missions were ghosts. The people he'd been tracking made sure his death looked like combat and nothing more. Naval Psych evaluated her after Derek Pass. The diagnosis was textbook PTSD, survivor's guilt recommendation for non-combat assignment. Kenzie requested instructor duty, away from the field. Away from missions where making the right choice meant watching someone die. She got the Compass Rose tattoo 6 months after Derek Pass, memorial to the man who'd seen something in her she still wasn't sure was there. For 3 years she taught at schools and ranges, passed on what Brennan had taught her, never took another field shot, never stopped hearing his last breath, never stopped feeling the weight of choosing the mission over trying to save him. Sagefield, Arizona, September 2023. Kenzie opened her eyes behind the rifle. The ghost receded. Derek Pass faded. She was back in the present with 14 men watching her, and a shot that suddenly felt like it meant everything and nothing all at once. Her hand moved to her left wrist, traced the Compass Rose tattoo under her sleeve. The gesture grounded her, brought her back. She settled her cheek against the stock again, started her breathing cycle over. Blocked out Bridger. Blocked out the observers. Blocked out everything except wind and distance and physics. This time when her finger found the trigger, it was steady. This time the world narrowed down to a crosshair and a shimmering silhouette 3,600 meters away. This time she saw the bullet's path before it existed, and then she heard footsteps behind her. Petty Officer Harlow. She lifted her head. Lieutenant Commander Meredith Vaughn stood 10 feet away, 37 years old. Blonde hair and a professional cut, wearing navy dress khakis that looked fresh from the cleaners. She carried herself with the kind of authority that came from years in naval intelligence, where words could kill just as surely as bullets. Kenzie had seen her exactly twice in 3 years. Once at Brennan's funeral, once at the memorial service 6 months later. Both times they'd barely spoken. Now Meredith was here and Kenzie felt something cold move through her chest. Commander Vaughn, call me Meredith. The older woman's voice was softer than Kenzie remembered. I'm here as an observer from naval intelligence. But I need you to know something before you take this shot. Kenzie stood slowly, left the rifle on the bipod. Ma'am, Meredith glanced at the men behind them. Stryker, Bridger, the others. Then she stepped closer, voice dropping. This isn't about qualifying for precision trials. You know that, right? Kenzie's jaw tightened. Commander Durant said I need to prove Derek Pass wasn't luck. He's half right. Meredith pulled something from her pocket. A sealed envelope. Brennan's handwriting on the front. Kenzie's name in his precise block letters. The world tilted. Nathaniel wrote this the night before Derek Pass. Meredith's voice stayed steady, but her eyes were doing something complicated. He left it with me, said if anything happened, I should give it to you. But only after you took another long-range shot in evaluation conditions. Kenzie stared at the envelope like it might explode. He knew. He knew the mission was wrong. He knew the intel was bad. He went anyway because that's who he was. Meredith held out the envelope. Read it after you make the shot. That's what he wanted. Why now? Why wait 3 years? Meredith's expression did something that might have been pain or regret or both. Because it took me 3 years to stop being angry. At him for dying. At you for being the one who came back. She paused. I was wrong about blaming you. He made his choice. You made yours. Both of you chose the mission. Kenzie took the envelope with hands that wanted to shake but didn't. He taught you everything he knew, Meredith continued. Said you were the best natural shooter he'd worked with in 15 years. Said you just needed to believe it yourself. She turned to walk away, then stopped. Make the shot, Kenzie. Not for them. For him. Prove he was right about you. Then she was gone, walking toward the observation area where Durant's SUV had parked again without Kenzie noticing. Kenzie looked down at the envelope. Brennan's handwriting. His words. Waiting inside like a ghost with something left to say. She put it in her cargo pocket, felt the weight of it there, turned back to the rifle. Bridger was watching her with an expression that might have been curiosity or might have been contempt. Hard to tell with men like him. Stryker was back at the spotting scope, professional and patient. The other shooters were waiting. The desert heat pressed down. The target shimmed in the distance, 2.2 miles away, impossibly small and impossibly far. Kenzie settled behind the Barrett MRAD for the third time. This time when her breathing slowed and her heartbeat steadied and the crosshairs found the target, something was different. She wasn't thinking about Bridger's doubt or Stryker's skepticism. She wasn't thinking about Derek Pass or Brennan dying or the 3 years of guilt she'd carried like rocks in her chest. She was thinking about a 7-year-old girl on a milk crate in the Nevada desert learning that excellence meant beating who you were yesterday. She was thinking about a father who'd taught her to see the bullet's path before it existed. She was thinking about a mentor who'd believed she was ready even when she didn't believe it herself. Her finger rested on the trigger. 4-count inhale, 6-count exhale. Settle into the pause between breaths. That's where the shot lived. She found it. And then the sun caught something in the scope glass, and for just a moment, she could swear she saw Brennan's face in the mirage shimmer. Not a ghost, a memory. His voice from 3 years ago. You were always ready, Kens. You just needed to believe it. The crosshair steadied, perfectly still, perfectly centered. She saw the bullet's path, and she let it happen. 20 hours earlier, the barracks room at Sagefield smelled like dust and gun oil and the kind of silence that made ghosts feel welcome. Kenzie sat on the edge of her rack in the dark, staring at a wooden box that held everything she had left of Nathaniel Brennan. Outside, the Arizona night pressed against the window. Temperature had dropped 40 degrees since sunset, the desert's way of reminding people that extremes were the only constant out here. Inside, the single overhead bulb painted everything in shades of amber and shadow. The box sat on the thin mattress beside her. Plain pine, maybe 8 inches by 12. No markings. Nothing to indicate what it contained or why it mattered. Kenzie's hands rested on her knees. She'd been sitting like this for 20 minutes, not moving, barely breathing. Just looking at the box the way you look at something that might bite if you reach for it wrong. Finally, she opened it. The American flag came out first, folded into the precise triangle they give to widows and mothers. Meredith had offered it to her at the memorial service, voice quiet, eyes dry. Said Brennan would have wanted Kenzie to have it since he'd spent more time training her than anyone else in his last year. Kenzie had tried to refuse. This belonged to Meredith, to family. But Meredith had pressed it into her hands anyway and walked away before the conversation could continue. Beneath the flag, a photograph. Kenzie lifted it carefully. The paper had gone soft at the edges from handling. Her and Brennan at a firing range somewhere in Virginia, both in full kit rifles at their shoulders, grinning like idiots. This was 6 months before Derek Pass, before everything ended. She remembered that day with perfect clarity. She'd shot 98 out of 100 on the MK-13 at distances that made the range safety officer recalculate his insurance coverage. Brennan had bought the entire training cadre beers, afterward told everyone who'd listen that Kenzie was a natural, that most people fought the rifle, but she let it happen. In the photo, his face was unlined by the things that would kill him. His eyes were clear. His smile reached all the way to the corners. Kenzie traced his face with one finger. The memory came whether she wanted it or not. Afghanistan, the ridge above Derek Pass, dawn light turning the mountains the color of old blood. Brennan beside her running permission checks on the rifle, voice calm and methodical. After this op, I'm putting your name in for DevGru instructor track, he'd said. Not looking at her, just checking the scope mounts, tightening everything to exact torque specs. You're wasted doing designated marksman work. You should be training the next generation. Kenzie had been adjusting her spotting scope. Meredith won't like that. Meredith wants me safe. Brennan had glanced at her, then something complicated in his expression. This life isn't safe, but it's the one I chose. The one you chose. Might as well be excellent at it. 3 hours later, he was dead. Kenzie set the photograph down. Her hands were shaking. Beneath the photo, Brennan's dog tags. She'd found them in his gear after they'd brought him back to the FOB. Someone had cleaned the blood off, but she could still see dark stains in the stamped letters of his name. Brennan, Nathaniel J. Master Chief, Petty Officer, U.S. She wrapped the chain around her fingers. The metal was cold. Real in a way memories weren't rain. She tried to stand, tried to put the box away and get some sleep because the test was in 8 hours and she needed to be sharp. But her legs wouldn't move. The ghosts had their teeth in her now. She saw Brennan's chest exploding, saw the blood, saw his hand grabbing her wrist with failing strength, heard his voice choking out those last words. Finish it. 2 o'clock, 2,200 meters. She'd made that shot. 2,200 meters. Moving target in a ghillie suit. Crosswind gusting to 20 miles per hour. Every factor working against her. She'd made it anyway because Brennan had taught her how. And then she'd carried his body down the mountain while 12 men lived because of the covering fire she'd provided after he died. Bronze Star with valor. The citation said she demonstrated exceptional courage under fire. Said she'd eliminated a high-value target at extreme range while under duress. Said her actions saved multiple American lives. The citation didn't say she'd chosen the shot over trying to save Brennan. The citation didn't say she'd packed gauze into his chest for maybe 30 seconds before giving up and moving to the rifle. The citation didn't say she still woke up every night wondering if those 30 seconds could have made a difference. Kenzie stood abruptly. The box nearly fell. She caught it, set it on the small desk, and moved to the window. She needed to run numbers, needed to prepare. The test was 8 hours away, and she couldn't afford to be in her head like this. She pulled out her ranged notebook, opened to a blank page, started calculating. Barrett MRAD, .375 Chaytak, 350 grain projectile. Muzzle velocity right around 2,900 feet per second. Time of flight at 3,600 meters, approximately 4 seconds. Bullet drop catastrophic. Close to 80 feet of vertical fall once you factored in the ballistic arc. She'd need 320 minutes of angle elevation after accounting for the 40 MOA rail. Wind would be the real killer. Even a gentle 5-mile-per-hour crosswind could push the round 20 feet off course at that distance. Desert air didn't cooperate. Its surge twisted, boiled upward in thermals that bent the bullet path like light through a prism. She'd have to read every shift perfectly. Then there was Coriolis effect. At 3,600 meters, the Earth's rotation would nudge the round almost 2 feet. Add spin drift another 6 inches, humidity, altitude, air density, temperature gradients in the first 1,000 meters versus the last 1,000. None of it could be ignored. The numbers started to blur on the page. She blinked hard, refocused. 320 MOA elevation, 74 MOA windage for an 8-mile-per-hour western crosswind. Adjust down to 73 if the wind settled. Adjust up to 76 if it gusted. She wrote it all down, checked it, rechecked it. The numbers were right. They'd always been right. But her hands were shaking, and when she looked down at them, they were covered in blood that wasn't there. Brennan's blood. The hallucination lasted maybe 2 seconds before her rational mind shut it down. But 2 seconds was enough. Her breathing had gone ragged, heart rate spiking. The familiar cold weight of panic settling into her chest like someone had filled her lungs with concrete. Not now, not tonight, not 8 hours before she had to prove she wasn't broken. 4-count inhale, 6-count exhale. Brennan's technique, the one he taught her for controlling pre-mission stress, for finding calm in the middle of chaos. 4 in, 6 out, settle into the pause between breaths. Her heart rate slowed, the shaking in her hands eased. She was back in control. But she knew she wasn't sleeping tonight. The knock on the door came at 2300 hours, 3 sharp raps, professional. Not aggressive, but not tentative either. Kenzie opened it and found Lieutenant Commander Meredith Vaughn standing in the hallway. For 3 seconds, neither of them spoke. Meredith looked exactly like she had at Brennan's funeral 3 years ago. Blonde hair and a professional cut that somehow stayed perfect even in the Arizona heat. Sharp features that could have been carved from marble. Wearing navy dress khakis that looked fresh from the cleaners despite the late hour. But her eyes were different. At the funeral, they'd been hard, distant, like she was looking at Kenzie from the other side of a wall made of ice and rage. Now they were just tired. Commander Vaughn, Kenzie's voice came out steadier than she felt. I didn't know you were here. Call me Meredith. The older woman's voice was softer than Kenzie remembered. And I'm here as an observer from Naval Intelligence, but that's not why I'm at your door at 2300 hours. Awkward silence filled the space between them. They hadn't spoken since the funeral. Not really. Meredith had approached her once at the memorial service, 6 months later, said 3 words that Kenzie still remembered with perfect clarity. You let him die. Then she'd walked away. And Kenzie had let her because what defense could she possibly offer? Now Meredith stepped into the room without being invited. Closed the door behind her. Saw the wooden box on the desk, the flag, the photograph, the dog tags. Her expression did something complicated. You kept them. You gave them to me. I did. Meredith moved to the desk, picked up the photograph, stared at it for a long moment. This was taken at Little Creek, November 2019. I remember because Nathaniel came home drunk that night, happy drunk. Said he'd found someone who understood precision shooting the way he did. Said you were going to be the best instructor the Navy ever produced. Kenzie's throat went tight. Meredith set the photo down carefully. You need to know why you're really here tomorrow. Commander Durant said I need to qualify for advanced precision trials. No, Meredith turned to face her. You need to prove to yourself that Derrick Pass wasn't luck. That Nathaniel was right about you. The words hit like physical blows. Kenzie opened her mouth to respond, but Meredith kept talking. He died because I was on the scope instead of treating him faster, Kenzie said. The words came out raw. I was his spotter. I should have been scanning for threats. Should have seen that enemy sniper before he fired. Should have. He died because a bullet hit his heart. Meredith's voice went hard. You made the shot he ordered. You eliminated the threat. You saved 12 men who would have died if you'd spent another minute trying to do what combat medics couldn't have done anyway. You don't know that. I do. Meredith pulled something from her pocket, a sealed envelope, Brennan's handwriting on the front, Kenzie's name in his precise block letters. Because he knew. He knew the mission was wrong. Knew the intel was bad. He went anyway because leaving people behind wasn't something he was capable of. The envelope seemed to glow in the dim light. Kenzie stared at it like it might catch fire. He wrote this the night before Derek passed, Meredith continued. Left it with me. Said if anything happened, I should give it to you. But only after you took another long-range shot in evaluation conditions. Why, because he knew you'd blame yourself. Knew you'd carry it like you carry everything. Knew you'd need permission to move forward. Meredith held out the envelope but didn't let go when Kenzie reached for it. Read this after you make tomorrow's shot. That's what he wanted. That's what I'm asking you to do. Why now? Why wait 3 years? Meredith's jaw tightened. Because it took me 3 years to stop being angry. At him for dying. At you for being the one who came back. Her voice cracked just slightly. I was wrong about blaming you. He made his choice. You made yours. Both of you chose the mission. That's who you are. That's who he was. And I've been punishing you for it because I couldn't punish him. She released the envelope. Kenzie took it with hands that wanted to shake but didn't quite dare. The paper felt heavier than it should, like it contained more than words, like it held 3 years of guilt and grief and questions that maybe had answers after all. Make the shot tomorrow, Meredith said quietly. Not for them, not for qualification, for him. Prove he was right about you. Then she was gone. The door clicked shut. Kenzie stood alone holding an envelope from a dead man who'd believed in her more than she'd ever believed in herself. She didn't open it, not yet. She set it on the desk next to the photograph and the dog tags and tried one more time to sleep. Across the compound, in another barracks room that smelled like boot polish and old anger, Cole Bridger sat at a desk staring at a laptop screen that was destroying everything he'd believed for 3 years. The file was mostly redacted, black bars across whole paragraphs, classification markers in red text that screamed Level 5 restricted access. But enough was visible. Operation Nightfall. Derek Pass, Spring 2020, and buried in the tactical summary Overwatch Team Alpha. Master Chief Brennan N.J. Petty. Officer Harlow K.M. Bridger's hands were fists on the desk. He'd spent 6 months pulling strings to get access to this file. Called in favors from people he'd served with. Made promises to intelligence officers who owed him from operations that would never see daylight. All because he needed to know. Needed to know who was supposed to be providing Overwatch the day his brother died. And now he knew. Petty Officer K.M. Harlow. The woman he'd mocked on the firing line 6 hours ago. The woman he'd told to let the men handle it. The woman who was about to attempt a shot he'd failed at this morning. She'd been there. She'd been on that ridge when Jake bled out in the dirt 2,000 meters away. Bridger pulled out another photograph. This one was worn soft from 3 years in his wallet. Him and Jake in Afghanistan 2019, both in full kit arms around each other's shoulders. Jake had been 28. Special Forces Team 3, the best operator Bridger had ever known. Also the younger brother Bridger had promised their mother he'd keep safe. The after-action report said Jake died in the initial ambush. Took shrapnel from a booby-trapped door. Bled out before the medevac could arrive. The report said Overwatch did everything possible. The report said Master Chief Brennan died providing covering fire. The report said an unknown operator eliminated the enemy sniper at extreme range under combat conditions. But they didn't say who. Now Bridger knew. Kenzie Harlow had been there, had been part of the Overwatch team, had watched his brother die while she sat on a rifle 2,000 meters away. The rage came hot and immediate. Where was she when the ambush started? Why didn't she engage sooner? How many seconds did she waste before taking that shot? How many seconds that could have made the difference between Jake coming home and Jake coming home in a flag-draped box? He read further. Found the tactical timeline. 0547. Overwatch establishes position. 0612. Team 3 begins approach. 0627 contact. Ambush initiated, multiple casualties. 0628, Overwatch engages. Master Chief Brennan eliminates 2 hostile targets. 0629, Master Chief Brennan KIA. Enemy sniper elevated position. 0631, hostile sniper eliminated. Petty Officer Harlow. Range 200 meters. Bridger did the math. 4 minutes from contact to enemy sniper elimination. 4 minutes while Jake and 11 others were pinned down getting shredded by automatic weapons fire. 4 minutes too long, except, he read it again. Master Chief Brennan killed at 0629. Enemy sniper eliminated at 0631. 2 minutes. Harlow had eliminated a target at 2200 meters in 2 minutes, while her spotter was bleeding out next to her while 12 men were dying in a kill box. Bridger pulled up the ballistics calculation program on his laptop, plugged in the variables from the after-action report. Range elevation wind conditions at time of engagement. The computer spat out numbers that made his stomach drop. That shot should have been impossible. Crosswind 15 to 20 miles per hour. 90 feet of elevation differential. Dawn thermals creating unpredictable air currents. Moving target in full concealment. Hit probability less than 30%, even for world-class shooters in ideal conditions. She'd made it in 2 minutes while her team leader bled out beside her. Bridger sat back. The rage was still there, but it had gone complicated. Muddy. He looked at Jake's photo again. Then he looked at the tactical map showing where Overwatch had been positioned versus where the ambush occurred. The sight lines were terrible. Broken terrain, multiple dead zones. The only way to cover the assault team was from that specific ridge, and even then, half the compound was masked by terrain. Brennan had positioned them in the only place that gave them any chance at all. And when the trap sprung, he died buying time for his spotter to eliminate the threat. Bridger closed the laptop, stood, moved to the window and stared out at the desert darkness. Tomorrow morning, he was going to confront Harlow, was going to make her explain why his brother died, was going to make her accountable for the 4 minutes it took her to eliminate that sniper. Except it hadn't been 4 minutes. It had been 2. 2 minutes to make an impossible shot under impossible conditions while watching someone die. And Jake had been dead before the ambush even finished. The shrapnel had severed his femoral artery. The combat medic's report said he'd been gone in 90 seconds. Gone before Harlow even picked up the rifle. Bridger pressed his forehead against the cold window glass. He'd spent 3 years hating Overwatch for failing his brother. And he'd been wrong the entire time. Dawn came to Arizona the way it always did. Fast and violent, like the desert was trying to burn away the memory of darkness before anyone got comfortable with it. Kenzie had been awake for 3 hours. She'd run her calculations twice more, checked her gear 3 times, done everything she could to prepare for a shot that would determine whether she was still operational or permanently broken. Now she walked toward the range in the gray pre-dawn light, and Cole Bridger stepped out from behind the equipment shed to block her path. "My brother died in Derrick Pass." The words came out hard, controlled, like he'd been practicing them. Kenzie stopped, turned to face him fully. Bridger looked like he hadn't slept. Eyes red-rimmed, jaw tight. His hands were clenched at his sides. "Team 3, he continued. Sergeant Jake Bridger, 28 years old, died in the initial ambush. Kenzie felt something cold settle in her chest. "I'm sorry for your loss." "Where was Overwatch?" Bridger's voice rose slightly. "Why didn't you engage sooner?" The question hit like a bullet she'd been expecting for 3 years. "Master Chief Brennan died providing Overwatch," Kenzie said quietly. "I took over and eliminated the threat." "Not fast enough." Bridger stepped closer. Jake bled out, waiting for cover. 4 minutes from contact to enemy sniper elimination. 4 minutes. 2 minutes. Kenzie's voice stayed level. "Master Chief Brennan was killed at 0629. I eliminated the hostile at 0631. 2 minutes. And your brother was already gone. Femoral artery." The medic's report said 90 seconds. "I'm sorry, I carry everyone we lost that day." Bridger's face went through several expressions. Rage. Confusion. Something that might have been grief. Carrying it isn't the same as being accountable. "You're right." Kenzie met his eyes. "It's not, but accountability doesn't bring them back. It just means living with what we couldn't change." She walked past him, left him standing there with 3 years of misplaced anger and nowhere to put it. By 0630, all 14 shooters were assembled at the range. Stryker stood at the briefing position, coffee in one hand, roster in the other. He looked like he'd gotten about as much sleep as everyone else, which was to say not much. "Listen up. 2 attempts each at 3,600 meters. Same conditions as yesterday. Same rules." He paused. "Petty Officer Harlow shoots first." Murmurs rippled through the group. Bridger's voice cut through. Why her first top scorers should go. Stryker's expression went to ice. Because Commander Durant ordered it. Any other questions, Staff Sergeant? Silence. Didn't think so. Meredith stood off to the side, tablet in hand, filming everything. Official record, every shot documented. Commander Durant's SUV was parked near the observation area. He stood beside it, arms crossed, watching with the kind of intensity that made people nervous. Kenzie walked toward the Barrett MRAD. That's when Durant's voice came across the PA system. Amplified, impossible to ignore. Petty Officer Harlow, be advised this shot is part of your operational psychological evaluation. Kenzie stopped walking. Results will determine if you're cleared to return to field duty with SEAL teams. The desert went very quiet. Master Chief Brennan recommended you for DevGru instructor track before he died. This is your qualification test. No pressure. Kenzie turned slowly to look at Durant. The commander's expression was unreadable behind his aviators. Meredith's face showed she'd known this was coming. Kenzie felt the weight of it settle onto her shoulders like someone had dumped concrete. This wasn't about proving doubters wrong. This was about proving she wasn't too broken to function. This was about whether Brennan had been right or whether Derek Pass had shattered something that couldn't be fixed. She looked at the rifle, at the target 3,600 meters away, at the desert in this heat and the 13 men who'd already failed this test. Then she settled behind the Barrett MRAD and started her breathing cycle. 4-count inhale, 6-count exhale. Stryker was on the spotting scope professional as always. Wind 9 miles per hour from the west. Temperature 88 degrees. Mirage heavy at 2,000 meters, moderate at 2,500 light, beyond target. Range 3,600, elevation plus 52. Kenzie dialed her adjustments. 320 MOA elevation, 73 MOA windage. The crosshairs found the target through 2 miles of shimmer and heat. Her breathing slowed. Heart rate settled. Everything narrowed down to physics and wind and the bullet's path that existed in her mind before it existed in reality. Then Bridger's voice, loud enough for everyone to hear. $20 says she doesn't even hit dirt. Laughter from some of the shooters. And Kenzie's world exploded. The focus shattered. The calm evaporated. Suddenly she wasn't looking at a target. She was looking at Brennan's face in the mirage shimmer. His blood on her hands. Jake Bridger dying in the dirt while she sat behind a scope 2,000 meters away. The ghost had teeth and they were tearing her apart. Her finger froze on the trigger. Breathing ragged, heart rate spiking, she lifted her cheek from the stock and stood up, 20 feet away. That's all she could manage, 20 feet from the rifle before her legs stopped working. Meredith was there immediately. You okay? I can't. Kenzie's voice came out broken. There's too much. I can't. Read the letter. You said after the shot. Read it now. Meredith pulled the envelope from her pocket. You need to. Kenzie's hands shook as she took it, tore it open. Brennan's handwriting, precise, familiar, alive in a way that made her chest hurt. She read, Kenzie, if you're reading this before a shot, you're in your head too much. Here's what you need to know. You're the best natural shooter I've ever trained with, and I've worked with Tier 1 operators for 14 years. You don't need to be perfect. You need to trust the process. Wind distance physics. You know it all. The only variable is fear, and fear is just noise. Block it out. See the bullet's path. Let it happen. You were always ready. You just didn't believe it yet. Now go prove me right. Nathaniel. The words hit like a hammer to everything she believed for 3 years. Her hands stopped shaking. She folded the letter carefully, put it in her cargo pocket, turned back to the rifle. Bridger was watching her with an expression she couldn't read. The other shooters were waiting. Durant stood by his SUV, still as stone. Meredith gave her the smallest nod. And Kenzie Harlow walked back to the Barrett MRAD to prove that ghosts didn't get the final word. Not today, not ever again. The second time Kenzie settled behind the Barrett MRAD, something fundamental had shifted. Not in the rifle, not in the conditions, not in the target 3,600 meters downrange, shimmering in heat that could melt asphalt. In her. The envelope in her cargo pocket felt weightless now. Brennan's words had done what 3 years of guilt couldn't. They'd cut through the noise, the fear, the weight of carrying ghosts who never asked to be carried. You were always ready. You just needed to believe it. She believed it now. Her body settled into shooting position with the kind of unconscious precision that came from 10,000 repetitions. Cheek weld perfect, shoulder pocket aligned. Breathing already cycling into the rhythm Brennan had taught her before she knew his name would become a memorial. Behind her, 13 shooters watched in silence. The applause from her first hit had died. Now there was only the desert heat and the weight of witnessing something that shouldn't be possible become inevitable. Stryker's voice came from the spotting scope. Professional, measured, but underneath something that might have been awe. Wind holding at 9 miles per hour from the west, steady for the last 45 seconds. Temperature 88 degrees, mirage light across the full distance, conditions optimal. Kenzie's hands moved to the turrets without conscious thought. The first shot had been dialed for 9 miles per hour, but wind was never truly steady. The desert breathed, exhaled, changed its mind. She watched the mirage through the scope, read the shimmer patterns at 1,000 meters, 2,000, beyond. Saw the subtle shift that meant the breeze had eased just slightly. 72.5 minutes of angle. Half a click less than before. Her finger found the trigger, took up the first stage slack. The mechanical precision of a weapon system designed for impossible tasks. The crosshairs settled on center mass, perfectly still, perfectly centered. She didn't think about Bridger's challenge or Durant's evaluation or the 13 failures that had come before her. Didn't think about Derek Pass or Brennan's blood or 3 years of guilt that had just been cut loose by words written the night before everything ended. She thought about a 7-year-old girl learning that excellence meant beating who you were yesterday. She thought about a father who'd taught patience in a desert that had none. She thought about a mentor who'd seen something in her she was only now beginning to see in herself. The pause between heartbeats arrived. She pressed. The rifle punched into her shoulder. The crack echoed across 2 miles of wasteland. The smell of cordite and hot brass filled her lungs. 4 seconds. She stayed on the scope, watched the target through magnification that turned distance into intimacy. Waited. The silhouette jerked. Center mass, perfect. Stryker's voice came out quiet, reverent almost. Second impact confirmed. Center mass, consecutive hits at 3,600 meters. For 3 heartbeats, nobody moved. Then the range exploded, not just applause now. Voices raised in disbelief and respect, and the kind of recognition that came when excellence revealed itself in ways that couldn't be argued or dismissed or explained away as luck. Men who'd spent careers pursuing precision, who'd made shots in combat that ended lives and saved lives and changed the course of battles. Watching a woman demonstrate mastery at a level most of them would never touch. But Kenzie didn't hear them. She was still in that space between heartbeats, still feeling the rifle against her shoulder, still seeing the bullet's path in her mind like a line drawn in light. Her right hand moved to her left wrist. Fingers traced the compass rose tattoo through the fabric of her sleeve. True north. The name Brennan had earned by being the fixed point everyone oriented toward when chaos tried to tear things apart. Now it was her compass, her fixed point. Her reminder that some people believe in you before you believe in yourself, and sometimes that has to be enough until you catch up. She cleared the rifle, made it safe, stood. The applause continued, but she was already moving, walking away from the firing line with the kind of calm that came from finally understanding what Brennan had been trying to teach her all along. Excellence wasn't proving doubters wrong, it was proving yourself right. Cole Bridger stood 30 feet from the firing line face doing things he couldn't control. He'd watched both shots through binoculars, seen the impact splash, seen the precision that existed in a realm beyond anything he'd achieved in 12 years of professional shooting. 3 years. 3 years he'd blamed Overwatch for his brother's death. 3 years he'd carried rage at people whose names he hadn't known and whose actions he hadn't understood. 3 years of being catastrophically wrong about everything that mattered. The after-action report was still fresh in his mind. He'd read it 17 times last night, memorized the timeline, the ranges, the conditions, the impossible shot Kenzie had made while Brennan bled out beside her. 2 minutes from Master Chief down to hostile, eliminated. 2,200 meters. Crosswind gusting to 20. Moving target. 2 minutes. And Jake had been gone in 90 seconds. Femoral artery severed by shrapnel from a booby-trapped door. Dead before Overwatch could have done anything except what they did. Eliminate the threat killing everyone else. Bridger had blamed the wrong people for the wrong reasons and convinced himself he was honoring his brother's memory by doing it. Now he watched Kenzie walk past him and something broke open in his chest. Petty Officer Harlow. She stopped, turned. Those slate gray eyes finding his with the kind of directness that made lying impossible. He opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. I need to tell you something. About Derek Pass. About my brother. Kenzie's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind her eyes. Recognition, maybe, or resignation, like she'd been expecting this conversation for 3 years. Your brother was Sergeant Jake Bridger, Team 3, 28 years old, died in the initial breach. Bridger blinked. You knew. I read the casualty list every night for 6 months, memorized every name, every age, every hometown. Her voice stayed level, but something underneath it wasn't. Jake Bridger, Elkhart, Indiana, wife named Amanda, no children, loved hockey, wanted to open a sporting goods store when he got out. The words hit Bridger like physical blows. How do you know that? Because I needed to know who we lost, who I couldn't save. Kenzie's jaw tightened. Your brother died brave. The medic's report said he was dragging another operator to cover when the second IED went off. He could have run. He stayed. Bridger felt his throat close. I spent 3 years blaming Overwatch. Blaming you. I pulled strings to get the classified after action. Took me 6 months. When I finally read it, he couldn't finish. You realized the timeline didn't support your theory. I realized I'd been wrong about everything. Bridger's voice cracked. Master Chief Brennan died providing cover. You eliminated the sniper in 2 minutes under conditions that should have made the shot impossible. And Jake was already gone before any of it mattered. Silence stretched between them. I blamed you because I needed someone to blame, Bridger continued. Someone who wasn't the mission planners who sent us into a trap. Wasn't the intel officers who got it wrong. Wasn't Jake for being the kind of man who stayed when he could have run. He met her eyes. I blamed you because you survived and he didn't. And I'm sorry for all of it. For the comments, the doubt, the 3 years of hating someone who saved 12 lives while watching their mentor die. Kenzie looked at him for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was softer than he expected. Your brother's name is on the memorial wall at Dam Neck. I visit it every year on the anniversary. Lay a compass rose at the base. She paused. Brennan taught me that we honor the dead by living right, by being better than we were, by not letting their sacrifice be the end of the story. I haven't been living right. No, but you can start now. She extended her hand. Bridger stared at it, then took it. Thank you for making that shot, for saving the people Jake died protecting. Thank you for finally asking questions instead of making assumptions. They shook, held eye contact. Two people who'd been carrying different pieces of the same grief, finally setting it down together. When Bridger released her hand, something had changed in his expression. The anger was gone. In its place, something that looked like the beginning of peace. Those shots you just made. His voice was quiet. Best I've ever seen. If you end up teaching, I'd like to be in your first class. I'll keep that in mind, Staff Sergeant. She walked away. Left Bridger standing there with 3 years of misplaced rage finally burned away and nothing but respect in its place. Commander Durant waited beside his SUV, arms crossed aviators, reflecting the mid-morning sun. Kenzie approached with the kind of calm that came from having just proven something to herself that nobody else's opinion could touch. Petty Officer Harlow. While Durant's voice carried the weight of someone who'd seen a lot of impossible things become possible but was still impressed. Official operational psychological evaluation passed with distinction. Thank you, sir. You're cleared for full field duty. DEVGRU selection. Master Chief Brennan's recommendation stands. He pulled off his aviators. His eyes were sharp, assessing. But we both know that's not what you want. It wasn't a question. Kenzie took a breath, let it out slow. No, sir. Durant reached into his SUV, pulled out an envelope. Official Navy stationery, seal unbroken. Captain Rowan Pierce at Nightfall Command has been sitting on this offer for 2 years, waiting for you to be ready. He held it out. Lead instructor position. Naval Precision Warfare School, Seabrook Base, Virginia. You'd be training the next generation. Passing on everything Brennan taught you. Kenzie took the envelope, felt the weight of it, not just paper and ink. A choice, a direction. A way to turn 3 years of grief into something that mattered. I don't have to decide now. 72 hours, but I'll tell you what I told the captain when he asked my opinion. Durant's expression softened just slightly. Brennan was the best instructor I ever worked with. Made people better just by believing in them. You've got that same quality. Would be a waste to put you back in the field when you could be building the next 20 years of shooters. He climbed into the SUV, started the engine, rolled down the window. One more thing. That letter Brennan left you, the one Lieutenant Commander Vaughn delivered. He paused. He wrote it because he knew the mission was bad, knew he might not come back, knew you'd blame yourself. Everything he did that night was about making sure you'd be okay after he was gone. Durant put the SUV in gear. Don't waste that gift. Then he drove away, leaving Kenzie alone with two envelopes in her hands and the desert sun burning overhead, and a decision that felt like it had already been made 3 years ago by a man who'd believed in her before she believed in herself. Lieutenant Commander Meredith Vaughn found her an hour later, sitting in the shade of the equipment shed, both envelopes open on the ground beside her, Brennan's letter in one hand, the job offer in the other. Meredith sat down without being invited. They didn't speak for a full minute, just two women who'd loved the same man in different ways watching heat waves rise off the desert floor. I used to hate this place, Meredith said finally. These ranges, these bases, everything that took him away from home. She picked up a pebble, turned it over in her fingers. Now I understand why he kept coming back. Why did he? Because this is where he made sense, where the world had rules and structure and purpose. Meredith threw the pebble. It bounced once and disappeared into sagebrush. At home, he was just a guy trying to figure out how to be a husband. Out here, he was true north, the fixed point, the constant. Kenzie set Brennan's letter down carefully. I'm sorry for not saving him, for choosing the shot. Stop, Meredith's voice went hard. I blamed you for 3 years and I was wrong. Nathaniel made his choice. He went into Derrick Pass knowing it was likely a trap. Went anyway because leaving people behind wasn't something he was wired to do. You made your choice, took the shot he ordered, saved 12 lives. Both of you chose the mission. That's who you were, who he was. She turned to face Kenzie directly. I came here to tell you something I should have said 3 years ago. Her voice softened. Thank you for being with him at the end, for not letting him die alone, for finishing what he started, for carrying him down that mountain when you could have waited for help. Kenzie felt her throat go tight. There's something else. Meredith pulled out her phone, scrolled through photos, stopped on one, held it out. A young woman, 19 maybe, dark hair, sharp eyes, standing in front of a Navy recruiting office in dress blues. Sarah Morrison, Nathaniel's niece. His brother Thomas died last year, cancer. Sarah and her mother Margaret never had a relationship with Nathaniel. Margaret thought he chose the Navy over family. Meredith's finger traced the edge of the phone. But after Margaret died, Sarah found letters. Years of letters Nathaniel sent trying to stay connected. Margaret never wrote back, never told Sarah her uncle was trying to be part of their lives. Why are you telling me this? Because Sarah enlisted 2 months ago. Qualified expert marksman in boot camp. Put in a request for advanced precision training. Meredith looked up from the phone. She's trying to understand the uncle she never knew. Trying to understand what mattered enough that he kept writing letters that never got answered. Kenzie stared at the photo. Sarah Morrison had Brennan's eyes. The same sharp intelligence. The same intensity. If I take this instructor position, she'll probably end up in your class. Yes. Meredith put the phone away. I'm not asking you to take care of her. I'm just telling you she exists. That Nathaniel's legacy isn't just the operators he trained. It's family he never stopped trying to reach. Family that's finally asking questions about who he was. She stood, brushed dust from her khakis. Make your choice based on what you need, not what you think you owe him. He wouldn't want it any other way. Then she walked away. Left Kenzie alone with an envelope that offered a future and a photograph that promised Brennan's past wasn't finished teaching her things yet. That evening in her barracks room, Kenzie filled out the acceptance paperwork. Chief Petty Officer Kenzie Harlow. Lead Instructor Naval Precision Warfare School. Report date 3 weeks. She signed it, sealed it, dropped it in outgoing mail before doubt could find purchase. Then she packed up the wooden box, the flag, the photograph, the dog tags, Brennan's letter. All of it went into her sea bag for the move to Virginia. The compass rose tattoo on her wrist caught the light from the desk lamp. True north. She was heading there now. Finally, after 3 years of being lost. 3 weeks later, Naval Precision Warfare School, Seabrook Base, Virginia. The classroom smelled like gun oil and anticipation, and the particular kind of nervous energy 18 elite operators generated when they didn't know what to expect. Chief Petty Officer Kenzie Harlow stood at the front in her instructor's uniform. Anchors on her collar are still shiny and new. The weight of them felt right in a way field gear never quite had. She looked across the faces. 15 men, 3 women, SEALs, Force Recon Marines, Army Special Forces, the best shooters their services could produce. All here because they wanted to be better. In the front row, Staff Sergeant Cole Bridger. He'd requested transfer the day after Sagefield. Told his command he wanted to learn from someone who actually understood precision instead of just talking about it. In the base, Senior Chief Garrett Stryker, auditing as an observer, he'd personally asked to watch her teach, said he needed to see what real instruction looked like. To the side, Lieutenant Commander Meredith Vaughn. She'd taken a position with Naval Intelligence's training oversight. Said someone needed to make sure Brennan's legacy got honored properly. Kenzie waited for the room to settle, let the silence build until it had weight. Then she picked up the photograph from her desk. Her and Brennan at a range in Virginia, both grinning, rifles at their shoulders. The last time either of them had believed the future was something that could be planned for. This course is advanced long-range precision. Her voice carried without effort. Some people want to call it the Harlow course. I'm asking you not to. This is Master Chief Nathaniel Brennan's legacy. Everything I teach comes from him. She held up the photo so everyone could see Brennan's face. Master Chief Brennan believes shooting isn't about the target. It's about you, your discipline, your patience, your ability to trust fundamentals when everything's telling you to rush or force or guess. She paused. The rifle doesn't care what you feel. Wind doesn't care who you are. Physics doesn't give special treatment. What matters is whether you can control the variables you control and accept the ones you can't. She set the photo down with care. You're here because you're already excellent. My job isn't to make you better shots. It's to teach you how to make shots when everything's falling apart, when conditions are impossible, when one round is all you've got and the people depending on you are running out of time. The room had gone absolutely quiet. We're going to train at distances most courses call theoretical. 3,200 meters, 3,600, 4,200, when conditions allow. We're going to train in rain and wind and heat that makes mirage readings useless. You're going to fail? A lot. That's the entire point. She moved to the whiteboard, picked up a marker. First lesson, why everything you think you know about ultra-long-range ballistics is incomplete. She started writing. Complex equations. Coriolis corrections based on latitude and direction. Temperature inversions. Pressure altitude versus density altitude. Behind her, 18 students pulled out notebooks. Started writing, started learning. The next 3 weeks blurred together in a rhythm of classroom sessions and range time and individual coaching that pushed everyone past what they thought their limits were. Kenzie taught from behind the spotting scope more often than the rifle, calling wind values, watching students miss, helping them understand not just that they missed, but why. Not just telling them the correction, but making them work through the math until they could see it themselves. The 3 female students got extra attention, not because they needed it more, because Kenzie remembered what it meant to be the only woman in rooms that didn't expect you to succeed. Remembered the weight of representing everyone who looked like you instead of just yourself. She taught them to carry that weight without letting it crush them, to prove excellence by being excellent, not by talking about it. Bridger transformed over those 3 weeks. The swagger disappeared, the assumptions evaporated. What remained was a professional shooter who discovered humility the hard way and decided to build something better on top of it. He stayed late most nights, ran extra calculations, asked questions that showed he was thinking 3 steps deeper than the curriculum required. In the second week, he approached Kenzie after class. Chief Harlow, permission to ask a personal question. Granted. When you made those shots at Sage Field, 3,600 meters, consecutive, what were you thinking about? Kenzie considered the question. Decided he'd earned an honest answer. I was thinking about a 7-year-old girl learning to shoot on a milk crate in Nevada, about a father who taught patience, about a mentor who believed in me before I believed in myself. She paused. I was thinking about everyone who'd invested in making me better, and I didn't want to waste that investment. Bridger nodded slowly. Thank you for being honest about that. Thank you for asking a question that mattered. He walked away different than he'd arrived. That's what teaching was. Kenzie was learning, not just transferring knowledge, helping people become versions of themselves that their past selves wouldn't recognize. By week 3, students were making shots they'd thought were impossible. Not every time, not even most times, but often enough to prove it could be done, often enough to rewire their understanding of what precision meant. The final qualification was 4,000 meters, beyond what any course had ever attempted. 18 students, 18 attempts, 6 hits. Better than any precision course in naval history. When the last shot was called, Kenzie gathered them one final time. Master Chief Brennan used to say that operators carry their instructors with them, that every shot you make includes everyone who taught you. Their knowledge becomes part of how you see problems, how you solve them. She looked across their faces. You're carrying him now, and everyone he learned from, and everyone before that. Generations of knowledge passed down. Well, she let that sit for a moment. Don't waste it. Don't let ego get people killed. Don't forget the mission is never about you. It's about bringing people home who trust you to be excellent when it matters. 18 voices responded in unison. Hooyah, Chief. They filed out. Bridger was last. He stopped at the door. Chief, Bridger. Thank you for teaching me that being wrong isn't weakness. It's just incomplete information, and information can be corrected. You did the correcting. I just provided the classroom. He smiled, first genuine smile she'd seen from him in 3 weeks. Then he was gone. The room emptied except for Meredith. She approached from the observation area. He's different. People change when they decide to. Kenzie started collecting materials, putting away the photographs and the ballistics charts and all the tools of transformation. Are you different, I mean? Kenzie looked at Brennan's photo on her desk. His face, his smile, the belief in his eyes that she was carrying forward now. Getting there. Good. Meredith moved toward the door, stopped. Sarah Morrison reports in 2 days. Next course rotation. Thought you should know. Then she left Kenzie alone with the knowledge that Brennan's legacy had more chapters left to write than she'd imagined. 2 days later, Kenzie sat in her office reviewing the roster for the next advanced precision course. 20 names, 18 men, 2 women. Second name on the list, Seaman recruit Sarah Morrison, age 19, qualified expert marksman. Personal statement, my uncle served with Master Chief Brennan. I want to understand what that meant. Kenzie picked up her phone, called the admin office. Chief Harlow, I need Seaman recruit Morrison in my office before course start. Personal meeting. Make it happen. 48 hours later, Sarah Morrison stood at attention in Kenzie's doorway. 19 years old. Dark hair pulled into a regulation bun, Brennan's eyes staring out of a stranger's face, standing with the kind of nervous energy that came from wanting desperately to belong to something bigger than yourself. At ease, Seaman, sit. Sarah sat, hands in her lap, posture perfect, eyes forward. Kenzie pulled out the photograph, her and Brennan at the range, set it on the desk where Sarah could see. Your uncle was Master Chief Nathaniel Brennan, True North, the best operator I ever knew, the best teacher, the best person. She paused. He died 3 years ago providing overwatch in Afghanistan. I was his spotter. I was there when it happened. Sarah's eyes went to the photograph. Something in her expression cracked. My mother never talked about him, said he chose the Navy over family, that he was never around when it mattered. Her voice was quiet, careful. When she died last year, I found boxes in the attic. Letters, years of letters from Uncle Nathaniel. Birthday cards, Christmas cards, photographs. He'd been writing to us for 15 years. Mom never responded, never told me he existed. Kenzie felt something tighten in her chest. He talked about family, about hoping the next generation would have chances he didn't, about legacy and what we leave behind being more important than what we accomplish. She gestured to the photo. He would have wanted to know you. Did he ever mention me? Mention that he had family trying to reach him? Kenzie thought about Brennan, about the few times he'd mentioned his brother Thomas, about the sadness in his voice when he talked about family that had chosen distance over connection. He mentioned wanting to repair relationships that were broken, wanting to be there for family even when they didn't want him there. She chose her words carefully. He never stopped trying. That's who he was. Sarah's hands were trembling slightly. I enlisted because I needed to understand why the Navy mattered more than us, why he kept writing letters that never got answered, why Mom hated him so much she burned his Christmas cards every year. She looked up, met Kenzie's eyes. Will you teach me not just precision shooting, everything? What made him who he was? Why it mattered? Kenzie picked up the photograph, looked at Brennan's face one more time. Then she held it out to Sarah. This belongs with family. Keep it. I can't. You can, and yes, I'll teach you everything he taught me. Starting Monday at 0500. Don't be late. Sarah took the photograph with reverent hands, stared at her uncle's face, the uncle she'd never met, never known, never understood until it was too late to ask questions. Thank you, Chief Harlow. After she left, Kenzie stood at her window overlooking the training ranges. Students were already out there, running drills, calling corrections, learning to see wind and distance and probability not as obstacles, but as variables to account for. Somewhere out there, the next generation was learning what Brennan had known, what her father had known, what generations of instructors before them had built through decades of knowledge, passed like inheritance from one set of hands to the next. She traced the compass rose tattoo on her wrist one final time. True north, always pointing the way forward, always showing the path home. And in the quiet of her office, with the sound of rifles cracking in the distance and students learning to be excellent, she heard Brennan's voice clear as if he stood beside her. You were always ready, Kens. You just needed to believe it. She believed it now. Finally. Completely. And somewhere in the mathematics of wind and distance and bullets arcing through atmosphere, somewhere in the precision of fundamentals trusted when chaos tried to tear everything apart, somewhere in the faces of students learning that excellence was beating who they were yesterday, Brennan's legacy lived on. One shot at a time, one student at a time, one generation teaching the next that some things matter more than coming home, like making sure everyone else does.